my guest on the podcast today is Dr. Temple Grandin. In this very special episode of APT Beyond the Classroom, I am so excited to introduce you to her. Temple Grandin is an animal advocate, an animal scientist, and a behaviorist. Temple is one of the world's foremost voices on the living experience of autism and neurodivergence. She has had a multi-decade career in animal welfare and animal sciences. Temple revolutionized the design of meat processing facilities with the welfare of the animals in mind, and has been instrumental in improving livestock handling practices within the United States and around the world. In 2010, Temple was named by Time magazine as one of the world's 100 most influential people in the category of heroes. Temple has a master's degree in animal science from Arizona State University and a doctorate in animal science from the University of Illinois. She has appeared across major media, including Primetime Live, The Today Show, and Larry King Live. She's also appeared in Time magazine, People magazine, Forbes, and the New York Times. Temple has also been the subject of multiple documentaries and the subject of a biographical television film entitled Temple Grandin, where she was depicted by actress Claire Danes. It was nominated for 15 Primetime Emmy Awards, and they won 7 of those. Temple has authored over 400 articles in scientific journals on animal handling and welfare. She's the author of numerous books, including bestsellers Thinking in Pictures and Visual Thinking. Today we are going to be talking about her new book, Autism in Adolescence: What Teens and Adults Need to Know. So without further ado, Temple, thank you so much for being on with us. It's just such a thrill to have you.
It's good to be here.
Well, if it's okay, I'm just going to start with my questions for you.
Okay, fine.
Okay. So my first question is, how can parents and educators best support adolescents diagnosed with autism as they navigate the very unique challenges of this developmental age?
Well, actually, adolescence was the worst part of my life. It's when all the panic attacks started, all the anxiety, the bullying started. I managed to get through elementary school without bullying because my teacher explained to the other students that I had a disability that wasn't visible, like a wheelchair. That's called peer-mediated intervention. But I was called all kinds of names in high school, and the only places where I had friends was friends who shared interests. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of friends who shared interests. Horseback riding and model rockets were one of the few places where I was not bullied. But, it can be really bad. The other thing during this period, kids have got to learn basic skills like shopping and bank account. I see too many parents overprotecting their kids. I'm seeing 16-year-olds that are fully verbal that have never gone shopping. This is ridiculous. This is something I was doing when I was 8 years old. We cannot let these kids become recluses in the room. Recluses in the room get into trouble, bad trouble. We don't go there. I just got off a Zoom call this morning with a family, and this girl was being badly bullied in school, and they wanted to homeschool. I said, it's fine to homeschool, but no recluses in the room. She's 15 years old. She can get a job. She's really super smart. She can do the homework, do the school at night and on weekends, but get a job. She's got to get out in the community. If you're doing homeschooling, you're going to have a homeschool group, a 4-H club, scouting, something. They got to get out of the room, off the video games, off the screens, and get out in the real world. I just cannot emphasize that enough. Now, of course, here I am talking about the fully verbal teenagers. The other thing I want to mention about non-speaking, some of you non-speaking can learn to type independently. That is something that needs to be encouraged. And you need to use a tablet because they cannot attention shift. They cannot do the gaze shift. I got to be careful about not moving too much because we a little bit of a weak connection. And so on this desktop, I have to look down and then look up. Can't do that. They need a tablet where
Okay.
the print appears next to the keyboard. That's
Okay.
really, really important.
Yeah.
Um, I often get asked, what would I tell my younger self? And I'd say, well, when you get out of adolescence, it'll be better.
Yes. Well, that kind of leads me, you kind of led into another question when you were talking about independence. So, the transition from childhood to adulthood, especially in terms of independence, what steps can families take to prepare for that shift?
Well, academic skills and other skills like working skills are totally different kinds of skills. I'm seeing sad situations, graduating from college, magna cum laude or whatever, and end up a recluse in a room, cannot handle the workplace. We need to start teaching working skills young. And a lot of famous people that were probably autistic, like Thomas Edison,
Yeah.
had paper routes when they were 11 years old. Well, I know those don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
So we have to find substitutes like
Others,
church
yeah.
volunteer jobs, walking the neighbor's dog, where they are doing a task for somebody outside the family on a schedule. Really, really important. The neighbor's dog, church volunteer jobs, help out at the farmer's market, maybe help an older person, that's living next door. Instant
Right.
illegal. They need to be getting real jobs, and this shift's not happening. I'll tell you something Mother did. When I was 13, Mother talked to a local seamstress who did dressmaking out of her home and said, well, Temple's really good at sewing. She can help you out. And I took apart dresses and I hand hemmed them. And I got paid for doing this.
Okay.
This is something that was just done in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
These things did not cost anything to implement. But they've got to, and then instant they're legal. Now, let's first, good tips for the workplace. Let's avoid multitasking chaos at a takeout window. Too much multitasking, too much rapid shifting of attention.
Okay.
The other thing is, long strings of verbal instruction don't work.
Yeah.
Pilots' checklists for things such as closing out a cash register at Walmart can save a lot of jobs.
Okay.
Otherwise the boss goes, yeah, I already told him 5 times how to
Yeah.
close out the cash register. He's stupid. If you'd written it down in the pilot's checklist, then you would not have had a problem.
Makes sense.
Basically, I have to have an external working memory and remind them pilots are required to use the checklist every single flight.
Yes. That's great. Okay, so you talked a little bit about maintaining friendships and that you were really connected with people that shared your interests. So I guess my question is, what would be your advice to offer to someone who is going through that struggle with social interaction? So an adolescent diagnosed with autism, how would you recommend that they go about having those social interactions more effectively?
Well, one thing you have to learn is you can't just go on and on and on for an hour talking about your favorite things. And I can remember doing that about a carnival ride until it just absolutely bored people. You can tell that story twice, and that's it. Make some rules on that sort of stuff. Now, the other thing is students have to get exposed to things to get interested. I've been working in the cattle industry now for 50 years.
Yeah.
And my cattle industry stuff started as a teenager. My special school I went to had a little tiny dairy. And then when I was 15, I went out to my aunt's ranch. And that got me introduced to the West. Kids need to get out and see and do a lot of different things. Find out what they like, but also find out something, well, I tried this and absolutely hated it. That's also important to learn. But get out and do different things. If someone had said to me that I'd be working on livestock handling equipment when I was majoring in psychology, I wouldn't have believed it. And then sometimes there's lucky things. I had an excellent animal behavior class when I was in college. I was lucky that my school had that class. Sometimes opportunities just arise.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, you know, um, adolescence is a tough time anyway, and heightened anxiety, um, especially for if you're on the spectrum. And so, are there any tools or techniques that you recommend for teens to manage stress or sensory overload?
Well, let's talk about exercise. That's
Okay.
really important. Found a burst of hard exercise. A lot of these teens are not getting enough exercise. That's something they can do. Sometimes they need to take chill breaks. I have problems in noisy restaurants because I cannot hear when there's too much background noise. I cannot screen out the background noise. That's a real problem for me. Rapid chit chat back and forth, I have difficulty following that. So what I tend to do when I go to a party is I'll talk to one person, then I'll talk to another person, and I've learned not to talk their head off. Maybe 10 or 15 minutes per person is sufficient.
Yeah.
Kind of have some rules on that. Um, then anxiety issues. I do take antidepressant medication. That started in when I was 30. I had horrendous colitis attacks that got worse and worse and worse and worse. And when I went on the low dose of the antidepressants, the colitis cleared up. And I discussed that in my book, Thinking in Pictures. Even though this is now like 27 years old, the drugs basically haven't changed.
Yeah.
And the big mistake that is made with antidepressants is too high a dose. It is starter dose or less. Because you give too high a dose, you're going to get agitation and insomnia. I've had parent after parent go, oh, my kid did just great on the low dose. We raised it and it was horrible. We'll never touch that drug again. And the problem was too high a dose. But I don't even know if I'd be alive today if I hadn't gone on the medication because I had so many health problems just caused by the anxiety and the stress. Now, on the other hand, I'd like to try exercise first, mindfulness training, cognitive therapy, taking sensory breaks. Those are things. Now, another little hint on sensory stuff. If you wear headphones all the time to block out sound, it will make it worse. What you want to do is have them with you all the time. And then if the fire alarm goes off, if there's some horrible noise, you can put them on. Also, you can often get to tolerate noises like vacuum cleaners and things like this better if you control it. When you control it, it's often a lot easier to tolerate. I talked to one family, their kid learned to tolerate sirens when they took them down to the firehouse and let them turn it on. You see, this thing of control is important with sensory stuff. But sensory issues are real. And I've seen people do chit-chat conversations where they kind of get in a rhythm back and forth of talking to each other. I can't follow that. I simply don't have the processor speed.
Interesting. Okay, now I know you talked a little bit about this before, but I wanted just to ask you, and I've read a lot of your books, but I wanted to ask you, were there specific mentors or experiences that made a significant impact in your development as an adolescent?
Yes, there was Mr. Carlock, my science teacher, a very important mentor. I was an unmotivated student who could care less about studying, and he gave me interesting projects to do. He showed me how studying was a pathway to becoming a scientist. And overnight, it turned my motivation around because I wanted to become a scientist. Another important mentor was Anne out at the ranch. And when I graduated with Franklin Pierce College with a degree in psychology, I went out to Arizona, and she still mentored me. These people were extremely important. When I was feeling down, I would call up Anne on the phone, and we'd talk and talk, and it was extremely helpful. I just can't emphasize how important these teachers and mentors were. And those were my two most important mentors when I was an adolescent. Now, when I was younger, it was my mother and teachers. But as an adolescent, those were the two important people. And they both spent a lot of time with me, and I owe them a big thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do you, as a parent, do you just look for those people who are involved in your, it might be a teacher, it might be, someone that they connect with?
Well, sometimes it just happens.
Yeah.
I mean, I've worked with a lot of people that were autistic when I was out on construction sites and we were building equipment, I worked with a lot of people that were probably autistic that owned big metalworking shops. And the shop teacher was one of the people that helped to turn them around.
Yeah.
I think one of the worst things the schools have done is taking out all the hands-on classes.
I agree.
Because this gets into my other thing where I talk about the different kinds of thinking. I'm an object visualizer. I discuss this in detail in my book of visual thinking, hidden gifts of people who think in pictures, patterns, and abstractions. And object visualizers are very good with mechanical devices. And some of these video game addicts can be weaned off with car mechanics. That has been very, very successful. And they find the motors are more interesting. So my kind of thinker is terrible at algebra. I don't understand algebra at all. I've never passed an algebra class. I'm worried about that being a barrier graduating from high school.
Oh, yeah.
Algebra is just too abstract for me to remember it. But my kind of mind is good with animals, mechanical stuff, art, and photography. Now, another kind of autistic mind you can have is your mathematician. It's patterns. Music and math go together. And, the music's something we need to have in the schools. Music and math kids. And we're not doing enough to develop our math kids. I'm hearing horror stories about math kids, especially elementary school kids, becoming gigantic behavior problems because they're forced to do little baby math over and over again.
Yes.
And then your third type of thinker is your verbal thinker. This is the autistic that loves the facts about favorite movies, favorite sports teams. And the kind of jobs that they can be very good at are specialized retail, quiet specialized retail. You work with one customer at a time, selling new cars, and they know every car on the lot. Selling business insurance. These are ones that have been successful. So when you have an autistic person, you're more likely to have a much more highly specialized mind, where so-called normal people have more mixtures of different kinds of minds. But there's research that shows that the object visualizer like me, my memory's like little phone pictures, is very, very different than the mathematical pattern thinker that's going to be good at chemistry, computer programming, and things like this. And we got to develop the strengths. We got to have a lot more emphasis on developing strengths that can turn into careers. You got to get a lot more oriented to where is that student 10 years after high school. I can think of a whole bunch of places I don't want them to be.
Yep.
And I want them in a good career. I was doing my first big important design projects after 10 years after high school.
Yeah. So the next question kind of ties in with that is I was going to ask you, what do you wish more people understood about the creativity and the strengths of adolescents with autism?
Well, I do a lot of talks to business people. I just got off a Zoom call the other day with the biggest construction company in the world. And one of the things we talked about was these old visual thinkers that just understand all the mechanical stuff. They're all retiring out.
Yeah.
And the kids that should be replacing them are playing video games in the basement when they ought to be out building a power plant.
Yeah.
I think building a power plant is much more interesting than stupid video games. And one of the things that I said to them is that we need to be, we can't take 10-year-olds on construction sites, but you can take them up to the fence and they can look. We can show them all kinds of videos of inside the construction job because you got to show kids interesting stuff.
Yeah.
And some of the funnest stuff I ever did was in construction. I love construction. And I'd much rather talk about construction, but I've done talks with the construction companies, power plant repair companies, travel websites, computer companies, and I make it very plain. We need the skills of the neurodiverse. We don't hire them just to be nice. We need their skills, period. You want to have electric power that works, you're going to need our skills. The mathematicians balance the power grid. I'm the one that makes sure it doesn't freeze in the wintertime.
So how are those conversations going?
Well, it's going very well. I've been invited to go to a meeting and visit a gigantic job site, which I'm really looking forward to. I'm going to get to go inside the fence. That's going to be fun.
Yeah, that's so awesome. Awesome. Okay, so I've just got a couple more questions for you. I I know that we've talked a little bit about how to any apps or technologies that you've seen that can be particularly helpful with communication, organization, or stress management. And maybe it's not a tool or
Well,
an
what I
app like
used to
a.
do when I was stressed out, this is when I was a young adult in my 20s. This is back when TV shows just came on at certain set times.
Yeah.
I'd come home and watch Star Trek at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And that was just a little time to decompress. And that's fine. Okay, if you did a little video game
Yeah.
just to decompress for an hour, that's fine.
Yep.
10 hours a day of video games is not okay. And total recluses in a room is not okay. Got to get out and do things. And things like mindful training, meditation, these are things that are helpful. They're not expensive to do. Also, the exercise. I
Yeah.
do 100 old lady push-ups every day and 100 strokes laying on the floor every day. And when I first started doing that, I couldn't get my legs off the floor. But that burst of hard exercise can be really helpful. The other thing, I want to talk about some other things. There's been a lot of issues about masking. Well, where that's the biggest problem is you're in a noisy restaurant, you're trying to hear everything, you've got to strain so much to hear. That's very, very stressful. But on the other hand, you can't be a filthy, dirty slob.
Yeah.
And there's a scene in the HBO movie, Temple Grandin, where they slam the deodorant down. That scene happened. I thank that boss. You got to clean it up. Hygiene, you got to clean it up. It's okay to be eccentric. I dress kind of eccentric. That's fine. Purple hair is fine. But you can't be a slob. That's something that has to be cleaned up. And I have to find clothes that are comfortable. I buy pants from Walmart because they're soft, and I have to wash them 3 times before they're good enough for a long plane ride. I have to have soft things against my skin. But a lot of the clothes they've got now, I was looking kind of a little synthetic dress that with tights that a lady had on. I go, well, that's comfortable. I could wear that. There's lots of attractive clothes now that you can wear. Also, my work clothes and my good clothes feel the same. I've gotten used to wearing long sleeves, so I just wear long sleeves. And then I see people, I think, get used to wearing shorts. I saw a guy at the airport doing the ground ops, and he had shorts on. I'm going, I'd be freezing. I just right now have shorts on out on the ramp. Yeah, see, I'm an associative thinker, so that picture popped up in my mind. Because I can remember when I wore shorts in the summertime, I had difficulty transferring to long pants. So now I just wear long pants all the time. But there are some, you got to find stuff that's comfortable.
Yeah.
Also, in the HBO movie, Temple Grandin, it shows exactly how I think. It shows visual thinking very accurately. It also shows some of the sensory things. Wash all the clothes that go against the skin. Wash them. Wash them. All the underwear, it's washed before I wear it.
Yeah.
I got to get the stuff out of it, whatever they put on it. I've broken out in rashes because I haven't washed some of that stuff.
Yeah. Well, we're in the midst of the holiday season. I can't hardly believe that we're almost through December, but I know I wanted to ask you this because it's overwhelming, during the holidays, the changes in routine, sensory overload, social expectations. I wanted to get your advice on, to individuals with autism as well as their families on really how to navigate these challenges during the holidays and create a more comfortable and enjoyable holiday experience.
Okay, now that's all right. Let's just talk about some things that were done with me.
Okay.
And we have adolescents, but we also have young kids.
Yeah.
And mother had high expectations, but there were accommodations. And I just about 2 weeks ago talked to family. Their 9-year-old did a scene at the airport because he wouldn't put his iPhone in the X-ray machine. That wrecked a trip.
Oh.
There's no excuse for that. All right, so I got thinking very seriously how my mother would have dealt with these sort of things. And she always gave some choices. Okay, let's say it's just a Christmas party, 4-day trip. You can leave the phone at home. That can be a choice. But if it comes to the airport, it's going in the X-ray machine. You have 2 choices. dog dish. Those are dog dishes.
Yeah.
Or put it in your bag.
Yeah.
Those are the choices. So there's some control there, but phones go in the X-ray machine, period. Another principle is no surprises. So let's say it's going to be the first trip to the airport. Now, some airports will let you do practice trips. But okay, if your airport doesn't do that, well, then you get on the TSA website and you look at everything. So nothing is a surprise. And maybe the guards might have to touch you. Well, you can practice that at home. You want no surprises. And I'm not a big fan of zoning out on screens, but once they get on the plane, if they want to zone out in a video game, fine. Plane is one place where you can just tune out on screens, because I don't want any trouble on a plane. But on the other hand, let's make it interesting. Watch planes take off. Let's look at pictures taken from plane windows. What does it look like to be up above the clouds? Let's start making this interesting. I can remember my first plane flight, and there was no way to look at pictures above the clouds. This is back in the 50s. And I was fascinated by what it was look like above the clouds. Well, that's the kind of stuff you can get kids interested in that. You start to make the trip interesting. And when I was on we would go on a ferry boat to go to our summer place. And when I was 5, I flung myself on the deck, screaming my head off because the horn hurt my ears. Yes, we are going on the ferry. But there was an accommodation. I rode in the cabin below. They didn't force me up there on the horn. And the other thing you could do is noise-canceling headsets. That'd be one place. Wear it for the whole 45-minute ferry trip.
Right.
And then other times get it off. And then, okay, family gatherings. Well, I had some places I could exercise. And my grandmother's apartment was 5 floors up, so I'd run up the fire stairs and beat the elevator. I always beat the elevator. And that kind of ran the energy out of me. At the other place we went to had a big long hall with a mirror at the end of it, and I'd run up and down the hall seeing myself get big in the mirror. I thought that was just so cool. And so there were some accommodations. And then when we sit at the table, family gathering, the rule was 20 minutes, and then you could ask to be excused. But if dessert wasn't served in 20 minutes, then you didn't get it. So I usually stayed there for the 20 minutes. And then if I really got stressed out, there was a spare bedroom with some toys in it.
Yeah.
But I wasn't allowed to stay in there the whole time, but I could have some time to chill in there. So those are some of the accommodations were done. And by the time I was 5, we could do family gatherings. And most of these were car rides. I remember when I was about 10, and we went on a trip to New York, and we went on a train, and Mother made it very plain that kicking somebody back of somebody's seat was not okay. I can't believe the flights I have been on, and parents have let their 7 or 8-year-old regular child kick my seat for the entire flight. Then I'd turn around and I'd give them really nasty looks, and the kid's still kicking my seat. And they didn't get the hint. That I didn't really like having the seat kicked. Or the tray table jounced up and down. You see, the other thing that I think helped the kids in the 50s is social skills were taught in a much more structured way. I was taught to say please and thank you to people. Mother would cue me. You forgot to say please. After I got Christmas presents, we had to write thank you notes. This was required. And it's kind of more structured and also a teachable moment. Let's say I took my drink here, do a little demo here of really bad table manners. Mother would say, use the spoon. People think that's disgusting when you stir it with your finger. She would quietly give the instruction. Give the instruction. And this was done with me as even an adult. I had a really good job coach. His name was Harley. He was the plant engineer at the Swift plant. That was back when I was in my 20s. And I criticized some welding, and I said it looked like pigeon doo-doo. And he pulled me into his office. And this is what he said. We have to nip these little cancers before they metastasize. Whitey, that's the name of the welder, is up in the cafeteria. And you're going up there right now and going to apologize. He told me what to do calmly and quietly in private. And you have to be direct. I was talking to a veterinary practice manager, and there was a really good vet tech, and she was a slob. And I said, you're going to have to just pull her aside and tell her she's going to have to take showers. And then another job got lost over scratchy scrub uniforms. Well, there's a zillion different scrub uniforms you can get. I'm sure you could find some that aren't scratchy and wash them maybe 3 times before you wear them. You can wear a T-shirt under a scrub uniform. A really good job was lost over scrub uniform. It would have been easy. See, I'm always looking at the easy ways for doing some accommodations. No, I can't. A brand new scrub uniform out of the box, I wouldn't be caught dead wearing that. It's going in the laundry maybe twice before I wear it. But that's a simple thing to do. They can save a job.
Yeah. Well, it has been such a delight talking to you. Thank you for answering my questions and having these meaningful conversations. I know our families are going to just enjoy hearing your insights. And I know as we're in the holidays, I just hope you have a great holiday.
Well, I just want to mention we've got to start teaching work skills. I want the transition to work done before the kids graduate from high school. Like to get 2 summer jobs under that belt before they graduate. The other big thing I want to talk about is driving. And if I hadn't learned to drive, I wouldn't have been able to do cattle industry. There's no public transportation for the cattle industry. And it's going to take a lot longer because of the problems with multitasking. I did 3 miles up to the mailbox at my aunt's ranch every day. That's 6 miles of driving every day. I started out in the middle of a horse pasture, had to learn on a manual transmission. And so you start out in a totally safe place, like big giant parking lots. That's where you start. It's going to take longer. But I really urge learning how to drive. And we spend a lot of time in a totally safe place before you do traffic. Just work into it much more slowly.
Okay.
Is what I'd recommend on that.
Yeah. The book, the Autism and Adolescence, I recently was reading it, and I would say, how would you describe just the essence of that book? Because just in general.
Well, it has a lot. It's got medical information in it. It's got some work information in it. What I tried to do is in a concise format, put a lot of practical information that people can use. I have a book called Autism and Education that's aimed more at parents of younger children. And also, a lot of people get kind of intimidated, some gigantic big dictionary-sized book.
Right.
Putting some of the most important information just all together in one place. I also tend to give very, very practical advice. And one of the things I've learned about people that think very verbally, you tend to be a lot more abstract. I mean, last night I was talking to a therapist that was working with some young adults. Now there was some trouble at work. And I said, I got to find out exactly what the problem is at work. Is it sensory? Are they getting bullied? I got to find out exactly what's going on. Otherwise, I can't help you. You know, early intervention with little kids, yep, I can talk pretty generalities on that, on things we need to do. Mm-hmm. But at the workplace, I got to know exactly what the problem is.
Right.
There's a tendency to overgeneralize. Oh, we have to just do accommodations. Well, I have found there's certain accommodations that come up all the time, like the pilot's checklist. That is something that would save a ton of jobs. And there's 2 kinds of checklists. There's things for like running the espresso machine, let's say, where that's something it's the same task, you got to do it a bunch of times. And then there's things where each day you might have a different set of tasks. There was a sad story where a guy that had built fencing all his life got fired when he got a new boss, and the boss went yak, 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 and he built the wrong fences. Mm-hmm. See, if he had just said, hey, I need to write it down. Let me just write it down what fences I'm going to build today, or what stuff I'm going to stock on the shelves today, or whatever the job is. Write it down. Because I have a very bad working memory. I don't remember long strings of verbal instruction. So that accommodation comes up all the time. Things with LED lights that flicker. That can be a problem for 10-20% of people that are neurodiverse. Then the whole office or the whole store, whatever it is just flashing on and off like a strobe light.
Yeah.
Please, on new construction, please don't put those horrible lights in. And it's not a cost issue. You just use the cell phone video in slow motion to find those bad lights. Please don't install those in new buildings, please.
Yeah.
Because you also have people who get migraines that have got problems with that.
Yeah, for sure. And
But I
even
tend
in,
to think about very, very specific things. I'm now thinking of a lady who lost a really good job in a factory because she got migraines, and I'm almost positive it was the lighting.
well, even look at the lighting in our schools.
Take your cell phone in there, put it on standard slow motion video, you'll find them.
I was a teacher back in the day, and I did a little experiment where I just turned off all of the overhead lights because I was really sensitive to it, but I had students that were, and I went to Goodwill and just found every light that I could find and just plugged them in all throughout the room. So we had beautiful light, but those overhead
Well, and
lights,
that can make a difference.
it
If you have
did.
windows, you can just turn the lights off. And now the best lamps are incandescent. You can't even buy those anymore.
Yeah.
So what you have to do is find LEDs that do not flicker. Test them with the phone. Also, let the autistic people pick out the lamps that you put in the bulbs that you put in the lamps to make sure they don't flicker. There's all kinds of electronic bulbs now, and some of them are good and some of them are terrible. And then that would solve the lighting, because that is probably the number one indoor environmental problem.
Issue, yeah.
And I don't have the problem, but I'm going to guess 10 or 20% of the population is going to have the problem.
Yeah.
And working with some of the other developmental disabilities, some of them have problems with that. Head injuries also have problems with that.
Yeah. Okay, so talking about the community at large, or schools, I guess, if we're talking schools, what advice would you give to schools and to the community to better accommodate and empower teens who are on the spectrum?
Well, I just read an awful thing this morning about a restaurant chain that there was a busload of like 18 individuals with different disabilities, and this restaurant refused service, and there was a Cracker Barrel restaurant.
Oh, wow.
And the corporate office had to apologize. That's no excuse for that. They'd called in for reservations. Obviously, you can't just take 18 people and dump them on a restaurant in the middle of lunch, but they'd called in and made reservations, and because we've got to get them out in the community doing things. And it was really bad. I was just reading it today. It made all the networks. This was horrible. And I think the 3 employees got fired at that restaurant for that.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff is just inexcusable. The other thing I have found is that some companies are doing a really excellent job with people with disabilities. Walgreens, the pharmaceutical chain, I think Randy Lewis was their CEO's name, and he reconfigured all the computers in the warehouse so you didn't have to read. And some of the people with developmental disabilities, they ran the warehouse better than the regular people did, because they didn't get bored.
Yeah.
You get people in the community, especially if they have a kid with a developmental disability, boy, they can be leaders on really doing some good stuff.
For sure.
That's really, really good. I went to a pork processing plant in the middle of Mexico, way down south in Mexico, and their CEO had a kid with developmental disabilities, and they had a great program. And they put the boxes together, and one autistic guy was so proud that he got a paycheck and he could help his grandmother, and he was in charge of all the labeling for export product. And that's something that has to be done really accurately and really carefully. It's really bad if you mislabel stuff that's for export. You've got to do that right.
Yeah.
I tend to think in specific examples, and find things in the community that we can do.
Have you heard of the Blue Envelope program?
Blue Envelope program? No, I haven't heard of that.
So I had on our last podcast, we had the chief of police in one of the cities here in Goodyear, and he actually has brought a lot of training to his department. They're like recognized.
Good.
Yeah,
That's
it's
great.
Amazing, but.
That's good.
They also, so he was on our show talking about the Blue Envelope program, which it actually started in Pennsylvania, I believe, but they've brought it to Arizona. So it's really simple. It's just
Well,
a
and
blue
there's some programs in Texas did a thing on communication disorder. So
Okay.
training the police when they come up to a car, and they can have it in the
Yeah.
database that the person has a communication disorder, and training of first responders. This is really important.
Yeah.
There's other programs, they have different names. I just wasn't
Yeah.
familiar with that,
Well, the
that particular one.
Yeah, so specifically the blue envelope is just for if you are a driver and you have autism, you can put your all it's just a place to put all of your paperwork. So if you hand that blue envelope to an officer, they know. Okay,
Yeah.
they're handing me the blue envelope. But
I see, okay.
yeah, but the training also that he's brought to his department, he was telling us, was just really great. And that blue envelope, you can pick them up, at the DMV or other places. We actually are in talks with them to be able to offer the envelope to our the people who come through our classes, because many
The
of
other
them.
thing you have to realize with someone with autism, if you get in their face too much, they can freeze. They can just absolutely freeze and won't respond. And the more you get in their face, the worse they freeze. That is something they need to understand that.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I think we need to do with all kids, I mean, if you have a firefighter all dressed up in the Scott Air Pack and all that, it looks like some alien. And then the kid hides from them when there's a fire. That's really bad. And that's something that they ought to have a fireman come in or fire lady come in with all that gear and show it to the kids and put it on in front of the kids.
Yep.
So then they realize that this person dressed up in all this gear is there to help them.
Yep. We
That's
actually.
another thing, because you don't want an autistic kid that gets out in the woods or something hiding from rescuers.
I know.
We wouldn't
Yeah.
want that to happen. And the other
Yeah.
thing is we need to teach the people to swim. Unfortunately, in autism, drowning is a very common cause. We need to teach them how to swim.
Yeah, we've been working on a big project. We teach CPR and first aid to direct support professionals who are working with people that have been diagnosed with a developmental disability. And we've been writing a curriculum specifically looking at things that will help them when they're supporting someone with autism. In particular, like you said, in an emergency situation. So we've really had a lot of input, and just from all of our other classes.
You're buffering, you're going to crash. You're going to have to stop moving.
Okay.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, so we're just really excited about that as well. Yeah. So
No, but these are things that are really important, because one of the things, slow processing speed is an issue. If I was a phone, I've got 1.5 bars of service, so the kid will be slow, or adult might be slow to respond, can't follow rapid conversation back and forth, has difficulty with rapid multitasking jobs like a takeout window. That can be problems, and especially to kind of avoid those sort of things. I have problems with interrupting because I can't time correctly when to break into the conversation. And the other problem is working memory. Long strings of verbal yak, 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 yak does not work. I need to write it down. I need to write the sequence down. And that's something that can be extremely helpful. Those are things that I need to do.
Yeah. Well, I've made it to the end of my questions, so I so
All right, you
appreciate.
made any questions, and I know it's been hard not to wiggle around too much, but when the connection, something's weak in the connection,
Yeah,
and if you limit the movement, the connection can handle
I've been
it.
trying.
Oh, I know you're trying, and I'm wiggling my hands around, but it's outside where the camera can't see it. So
Right. Well, thank you again for your time with us. It's such a pleasure. I have always been
it's
a
good
big
to
fan.
talk to you.
I know you're such an inspiring person. Our listeners are gonna be thrilled
All
to
right,
hear
great.
you.
Well, thank you so
So-
much.